Today I'm going to be going over a barbell squat. Now personally I think this is something everybody should be doing. If you're trying to develop your physique, improve performance, whatever it is, it's a phenomenal compound movement. I would argue one of the best compound movements there is. Great for training your lower body, developing strength, explosiveness, etc. But it's also a very challenging movement. So you get a pretty good calorie burn out of it compared to a lot of those super isolated movements. And because it is working such large muscle groups, I think it's just kind of good for confidence as well, because it's usually something we can all progress in pretty well as long as we know what we're doing. So that being said, you essentially just have two types of barbell squats, a barbell back squat and a barbell front squat. Now you can do various different stances with it, but we're just going to go over the basics of each of those squats today. So a barbell back squat, as far as bar position, I usually recommend kind of right where like your trap meets your shoulder. You have a little bit more cushion there as opposed to putting it up too high. And then when you start to put it down low, you're going to be at a higher, you're going to be more inclined to lean forward a little bit because that bar has to stay over your center of gravity to maintain balance. So right about in the middle there seems to be the most comfortable, and it's also the position that's going to be the least likely to have you, especially if you're inexperienced, involving too much of your lower back and straining something. As far as setup, hand placement, more or less is going to be wherever's comfortable. If you can grip a little bit closer, I do recommend gripping a little bit closer, because that's going to help you pinch those scapula tight packing together, which is going to be good for just creating a little stability in your upper back, but it's also going to be good for creating a little bit more of a shelf, give you a little bit more padding for where that barbell is going to be set. If you're a bigger guy, or a bigger person, I should say, I guess anybody could be bigger, and you have a little bit of a hard time grabbing in close because maybe the shoulder mobility is not as great, you can of course start wider. Again, it's not going to terribly impact the movement, just if you're able, grab a little bit closer. From there, pretty simple, just going to be unracking it. For a traditional squat, I would say feet more or less shoulder width apart, toes just slightly canted out. Now, as you come down, a lot of times you'll hear people saying drive through your heels or different things like that. You want to really be driving through your full foot. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of struggle with this one, is they try too hard to compensate driving through their heels because they don't want to be leaning forward, or they're not paying attention at all, and because a lot of us tend to be quad dominant, if we're not doing a lot of training, we end up leaning in too far forward, we're driving too much through the balls of our feet. So displacing too much one way or another can throw off your balance, but you're also going to be getting a little bit less muscle recruitment out of it, so you're not going to be as strong through the movement. So from there, pretty simple, just squat down, push those knees out slightly, so you just don't want to let them buckle, and up. As far as depth, I usually recommend trying to come at least to about parallel, and by parallel I mean your femur parallel to the ground. If you're comfortable going a little bit lower, I don't see an issue with it. Some people might argue that, but at least try and hit about parallel. If you're not comfortable hitting parallel, start off with a box or maybe some stacked up plates, or whatever you have available to you to be squatting down to. Obviously something that can support your weight, so that way you have something to kind of, I guess, give you that feedback when you're getting low enough. So if you had a box to be doing a box squat, you're coming down, and then once your hips touch, then you know it's time to come up. I also don't personally recommend setting up where you're walking out and then having to back up into the rack. I think it's easier to back up fresh and then walk into the rack when you're tired. I'm just doing this for the camera.